Danielle Reeves Holt was 34 years old when her husband kissed her goodbye for a business trip to Asheville on Valentine's Day. No client name attached to the booking. She almost didn't drive down to surprise him. She almost let the florist receipt in his jacket pocket mean nothing. Instead, she used the spare key card he didn't know she'd kept from a trip 18 months ago and opened the door to red rose petals arranged into a heart on the bed, and a woman half-dressed beside him. Andre didn't scream or panic. He just looked mildly inconvenienced, like she'd walked in on the wrong meeting. He had no idea she was standing 4 feet from the CFO credentials that still gave her full access to every account in the company they'd built together. He had no idea what she'd already noticed about the money. Danielle didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She set the keycard on the dresser and walked out. And somewhere on that drive home, in the dark, she made a decision that would end everything he thought he still controlled. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. The numbers never lied. That was the thing Danny had always loved about them. A spreadsheet didn't have moods. It didn't charm you at a dinner party and then go cold in the car ride home. It just told you what was there and what wasn't, and it waited patiently while you figured out the difference. It was 6:04 a.m. The kitchen was dark except for the glow of her laptop screen. Outside, the February sky was still the deep blue-black of early morning, and the neighborhood was quiet. No buses yet, no dogs barking. Just Danny, her coffee going lukewarm beside her, and the Q4 projections for Holt Development Group spread across her screen in clean, color-coded columns. She had built those columns herself. Every formula, every category. 12 years of her own thinking poured into a system that now ran quietly in the background of a company that bore her husband's name on the letterhead. She didn't think about that much anymore. She had learned not to. Upstairs, she could hear the faint sound of the shower running. Andre was up early too, which meant today mattered to him. Today was the groundbreaking ceremony for the Caldwell Street mixed-use project. 3 years of work, 2 rounds of city approvals, and 1 very stubborn zoning board finally out of the way. It was a real win. Danny had done the financing structure herself, threading together 2 investor groups and a municipal grant that most people wouldn't have known to apply for. Andre would be the one cutting the ribbon. She didn't think about that much either. He came downstairs at 7:15, already dressed, dark wool coat, the charcoal one that photographed well. He looked good. He always looked good in a way that seemed almost effortless, though Danny knew he spent more time in the mirror than she did. He moved through the kitchen with that easy confidence he wore like a second skin, the smile already half-loaded, ready for whatever room he was about to walk into. He kissed the top of her head, a habit, not a gesture. "Big day," he said, reaching past her for his travel mug. "You've got the revised site map in your email," she said. "Alderman Brooks is going to ask about the parking variance. The answer is on page 4. He nodded, not writing it down. He never wrote things down. He trusted that she would have already handled it, and she always had. She was watching her screen when he said it. "You used to get dressed up for Valentine's Day." Casual, almost bored, like a thought that had simply fallen out of his mouth on its way to somewhere else. You know, make a thing of it. Danny didn't look up right away. She kept her eyes on the screen for 1 more second. "I've got a call with the auditors at 8, she said. I know. He was already moving toward the hallway. "Just saying." The front door closed. Danny sat very still. She looked down at what she was wearing. An oversized Northwestern sweatshirt, the soft one with the cracked letters, and the same dark leggings she'd put on 3 days in a row. Her hair was up in a clip that had been on the kitchen counter since Tuesday. "You used to make an effort." She picked up her coffee. It was cold. She drank it anyway. She didn't have time to think about it for long because Bria came downstairs at 7:30, dragging her backpack by one strap and asking where her library book was. And then Marcus was right behind her with his shoes on the wrong feet, and the morning swallowed everything the way mornings did. Lunches, a missing permission slip, the particular chaos of two small people who needed things all at once. By 8:02, the house was quiet again. She was back at her laptop. She didn't think about what he'd said. She told herself she wasn't thinking about it. He called at 4:30, while she was in the middle of a vendor reconciliation. "Hey." His voice was smooth, a little too smooth, the way it got when he was already several steps ahead of a conversation. "Something came up. Client in Asheville wants a face-to-face before the Riverside deal goes to contract. I'm going to head out tonight. Be back Friday." Danny pulled the phone slightly from her ear. She looked at the wall. "Tonight is Valentine's Day," she said. "I know, babe. I'll make it up to you. This is a big contract." She asked for the client's name. He said Hargrove, moving past it quickly, already talking about the drive, the weather, telling her not to wait up. And then he was gone. She put her phone down. She went back to the vendor reconciliation. She finished it. She made dinner. She helped Bria with her reading and sat with Marcus until he fell asleep with his hand curled around the edge of his blanket. Then she came back downstairs. His jacket was still over the back of the kitchen chair, the one he'd swapped out before heading to the airport. She wasn't looking for anything. She was just moving it. The receipt was in the outer pocket, folded once. Bloom & Co. Florals, February 13th. 24 red roses. Arranged delivery. $187. Danny stood in the quiet kitchen and read it twice. She folded it back exactly as she'd found it. She set the jacket over the chair. She sat down, and she started to think. She called Renee first, not to tell her anything, just to ask if she could take the kids for one night. Renee said yes before Danny finished asking. That was Renee. She didn't push for reasons. She showed up. By 5 o'clock, Marcus had his overnight bag and Bria was already asking Aunt Renee if they could watch a movie with extra butter on the popcorn. Danny kissed them both, held Marcus a second longer than usual, and walked back to her car before her face could do anything she'd have to explain. She almost didn't stop at the store. She was already on the ramp to the highway when she thought about it, about the distance that had been growing between them for months. Quiet and slow, like a crack in a wall you keep meaning to patch. She thought about how long it had been since she'd tried, how long it had been since he had, too. But maybe that wasn't entirely fair. Maybe she had disappeared into the spreadsheets and the school schedules and stopped showing up as a wife the way she used to. You used to make an effort. She took the next exit. The department store was mostly empty on a Thursday evening. The lingerie section was in the back, past the Valentine's Day clearance displays. Red everything, already picked over, paper hearts curling at the edges. She stood in front of a rack for a long time. She chose something simple, deep burgundy, clean lines, nothing dramatic. She stood in the checkout line and almost put it back twice. She didn't put it back. The drive to Asheville was 3 hours through rolling dark, the mountains turning from pale gray to black against the sky. She kept the radio off. She drove with both hands on the wheel and let herself feel something close to hope. Not the big, cinematic kind, just the small, tired kind. The hope that maybe the distance had a fix, that she could show up and remind him she was still there, still her. She had been someone. Before all the early mornings and invisible work, she was still someone. She wanted him to see it. She stopped for gas outside of Marion and checked her phone. No messages from Andre. She hadn't told him she was coming. She turned that thought over in her mind and decided it still felt right. Surprises used to be their thing a long time ago, before the business got big, before the kids made everything logistical. She pulled back onto the highway. The hotel was newer, glass and warm stone, tucked against the edge of downtown. She had been here once before, 2 years ago, for a developers conference Andre had brought her along to. She remembered the lobby, The tall ceilings, the amber lighting, the way the front desk staff smiled like they'd been trained to make you feel like you belonged. She remembered keeping his spare keycard. She hadn't done it on purpose. She'd just slipped it into her coat pocket when they checked out and forgotten about it until she found it later in her dresser drawer. She'd meant to throw it away. She was glad she hadn't. She didn't stop at the front desk. She kept her coat on, her bag over her shoulder, and she walked to the elevator like she knew exactly where she was going. Because she did. Room 412. She had seen the number on the confirmation email before he'd closed the laptop. 1 second. That was all she'd needed. The hallway was quiet. Thick carpet, soft light, the faint sound of a television somewhere behind a closed door. She stopped in front of room 412 and stood there for a moment. Her heart was going fast. She smoothed her coat. She slid the key card into the reader. The light blinked green. She opened the door. The room was dim. A lamp on the far side was on, turned low. The champagne bottle on the nightstand was already open. She recognized the label before she registered anything else, because that was the label. The one she'd been saving since her birthday in November. The bottle she'd put in the back of the wine fridge and told herself they'd open for something special. Then she saw the petals. Red rose petals, arranged carefully across the bed in the shape of a heart. Deliberate, measured. Someone had stood there and placed each one. Andre was there. And so was a woman Danny didn't know. Younger, dark hair, a silk robe that wasn't the hotel's. They had heard the door. They were both looking at her. Nobody said anything. Danny didn't scream. She didn't cry. She stood in the doorway and looked at the petals, and the champagne, and the careful, planned shape of a heart that had never been meant for her. She looked at it all for a long moment, the way she looked at a spreadsheet that had just confirmed something she'd been afraid to check. She walked to the dresser. She set the key card down on top of it, gently, like she was setting down something that no longer belonged to her. Then she walked out. The parking garage was cold. Her footsteps echoed against the concrete. She found her car, got in, and gripped the steering wheel with both hands. Her hands were shaking. She noticed that. She breathed. She did not call Andre. She did not call her mother. She scrolled to a name she hadn't called in months and pressed it. He picked up on the second ring. Danny. Elijah's voice was quiet, steady, just her name, and already something in it that said, "I'm here." She stared through the windshield at the gray concrete wall in front of her. "I need you to tell me," she said, "everything I'm legally allowed to do, before I decide what I want to do." A beat of silence. "Okay," he said. "Tell me where you are." Elijah didn't ask her what she saw. He asked if she was sitting down. She said she was in her car. He said, "Good, stay there a few minutes before you drive." Then he talked. "Listen to me carefully," he said. "Do not text him anything tonight. Not one word. No confrontations, no questions, nothing in writing that shows you know. Anything you send him right now, in this state, he can use." "I know," she said. "I know you know. I'm saying it anyway." His voice was measured, calm in the way that meant he'd already shifted into a different gear. "Don't go back up to that room. Don't call the hotel. Don't touch any files tonight. Don't move any money. Don't look at anything from anger. You hear me?" She pressed her forehead against the steering wheel. "Danny." "I hear you. You're smart enough to do this right. That means you wait. When you get home, you sleep. Or you try. And when the kids are at school, you call me and we meet in person." He paused. "Can you drive?" She checked her hands. The shaking had gone still. "Yes." "Then go home," he said. "We'll figure out the rest when I can see you." She sat there another minute after she hung up. The garage hummed around her. Somewhere above her, on the 4th floor of that hotel, the champagne she'd been saving was still open on the nightstand. She started the car. She got home at 2:47 in the morning. She changed out of her clothes in the dark, folded everything neatly, and set the burgundy bag from the department store on the closet shelf without opening it. She lay down on top of the covers. She did not sleep, not really, but she rested her eyes and kept her breathing even and let her mind do what it needed to do. By 5:30, she was up. She made lunches. She made oatmeal with brown sugar the way Marcus liked it, and cut Bria's toast into triangles because Bria was 7 and triangles still mattered. She picked them up from Renee's before school drop-off, hugging her sister at the door, while Renee searched her face with the look she'd been using since they were girls. That look that said, "I see something, and I will wait." Danny just shook her head, once. "Not here." Renee let it go. Andre came home the following evening. He came through the front door with his rolling bag and that easy, post-trip exhale he always did, like the house was something he returned to and refreshed himself against. He set his keys on the hook. He smelled like a different cologne than the one she'd noticed on him 2 days ago, and she filed that away without moving a muscle in her face. "Hey, babe." He dropped a kiss on top of her head as she stood at the kitchen counter, flipping through the week's school notices. "Hey," she said. "Good trip?" "Long. The Hargrove meeting ran late." He opened the refrigerator. "You eat?" "The kids and I had pasta." "Save me any?" "Pot's still on the stove." He helped himself. He sat at the kitchen island. He talked about Asheville like it was the most ordinary thing. The traffic, the parking, a client whose handshake had been too firm. She stood across from him and listened and made small sounds that meant, "I'm listening," and gave him nothing. Not one flicker. She watched him eat the dinner she had made, in the kitchen she managed, in the house she had built the financial foundation of, and she thought, not yet. Not until she knew everything. Not until she understood the full size of what she was standing in the middle of. She had learned that from years of forensic bookkeeping. You do not confront a discrepancy before you've traced every line it touches. You wait until the picture is complete. Then you act. Elijah's office was on the 14th floor of a glass building in uptown Charlotte. Clean, quiet, the kind of space that said, "Nothing happens here by accident." He met her at the door himself. He looked at her the way Renee had, searching, careful, but he didn't say anything about what she looked like or what she must be feeling. He just handed her a coffee and led her to the table by the window. He had already pulled documents. "You're a co-founder," he said. "Your name is on the original partnership agreement, the operating agreement, the federal EIN registration. You have standing as a 50% stakeholder, and as CFO, you have documented fiduciary authority over the company's financial records." "Which means I can access everything," she said. "Everything. Payroll, invoices, vendor contracts, expense accounts, credit lines." He looked at her steadily. "Every single ledger." She wrapped her hands around the coffee cup. "If there's anything wrong in those books," Elijah said, "you'll find it." "I know I will." She set the cup down. "I just need to know what I'm looking for before I go looking." He nodded. He turned the first page toward her, and Danny began to learn the full shape of what her husband had done. The office was quiet by 7. Andre had left at 6:15. She had watched the elevator doors close behind him from the window of her office, then sat still for 10 more minutes just to be sure. When his black Audi pulled out of the garage below, she got up, poured the last of the afternoon coffee down the drain, and sat back down at her desk. She logged in, not as the woman who trusted her husband, not as the mother who had made oatmeal that morning and signed a permission slip for Bria's field trip, and nodded along to Andre's dinner conversation about a project she already knew the numbers for better than he did. She logged in as the CFO. That was a different set of eyes entirely. Most of the accounts she handled directly, but there were 3 budget lines she had delegated 2 years ago to junior staff when her workload ballooned after Marcus was born. Vendor management, marketing spend, and a miscellaneous consulting account that Andre had said he'd oversee personally. She had let him. She had trusted him. She started with the consulting account. The line item appeared monthly. Clean entries, evenly spaced, each one labeled with the same description. SC Marketing Group, retainer services. She had seen it in summary reports before and noted it without question. It was Andre's department. He handled vendor relationships. She had never had a reason to pull the contract. She pulled the contract now. It was 2 pages, professional-looking. It named SC Marketing Group as the service provider and Holt Development Group as the client, listed a monthly retainer of $4,000, and bore 2 signatures at the bottom, Andre's and one other, Simone Carver. Danny read the name twice. She kept her face very still. She had met Simone Carver at a company dinner 18 months ago. Polished, confident, younger than Danny had expected. Andre had introduced her as the firm's new marketing consultant, saying she came highly recommended. Simone had shaken Danny's hand and smiled and said, "I've heard so much about you." Danny had thought she seemed sharp. She pulled every payment made to SC Marketing Group going back 22 months. $4,000 a month became the floor. There were additional invoices on top. Project fees, research fees, a vague line labeled campaign development, and every invoice bore Simone's signature. 41 invoices, all signed, all paid. Then, Danny looked at where the money actually went. It took her 40 minutes to trace it. She moved through the bank integration records slowly, the way she always did with discrepancies. No rushing, no assuming, just following the numbers wherever they led. The payments from the company account cleared to a business account in the name of SC Marketing Group. That account, she found through a cross-reference tax ID number buried in the original vendor intake form, was registered to a residential address in South End. She pulled the address. She looked at it for a long time. Then, she opened the company credit card portal, the supplemental card account Andre had requested 18 months ago for vendor relationship management, and went through every charge. Furniture. A car payment? Monthly rent charges from a property management company? She typed the property management company's name into a search window. Residential, luxury apartments, South End. Same address. $342,800. Spread across 22 months. Company funds, joint account transfers routed through a shell retainer, and a credit card that had never appeared on any summary report she'd been handed because it fed directly into a vendor account she'd had no reason to audit. Her husband had stolen from their company to pay for another woman's life, and the woman had signed her name to every invoice. Danny did not rush. That was the thing about being good at this. You don't rush. You make sure. She went back through every entry one more time, methodical and slow, and when she was certain she had the full picture, she opened a private encrypted drive Elijah had set up for her the morning of their meeting. She photographed everything with her phone, statement by statement, invoice by invoice, the vendor intake form with the address, the credit card portal, the original contract with Simone Carver's signature at the bottom. 41 invoices, every page. Then she logged out of every account, cleared her session, and sat for a moment in the blue-gray quiet of the empty office. The city lights spread out beyond the window. Charlotte glittered, like it always did, like nothing was wrong, like this was just another Tuesday night. She picked up her bag, turned off her desk lamp, and took the elevator down. She sat in her car in the parking garage and called Elijah. He picked up on the second ring. "I found it," she said. $342,000. Andre's been funneling company money to Simone Carver for almost 2 years. Apartment, car, a credit card, all run through a fake marketing retainer. A beat of silence. "And she signed the invoices," Danny said. "Every single one. Her name is on all of it." Elijah's voice, when it came, was careful. "So it's not just personal." "No," Danny said. "It's theft. From a company I half own." She looked straight ahead through the windshield. And Simone Carver isn't just the other woman anymore. Elijah's office was on the 14th floor of a building on Tryon Street. Clean lines, dark wood, a single window that looked out over the uptown skyline. No clutter, no personal photographs, just a long conference table, a whiteboard, and 2 chairs that Danny had started to think of as theirs. She got there at 8:15. He was already at the table with a yellow legal pad and a cup of coffee he hadn't touched. He looked up when she walked in, and he didn't say good morning or how are you holding up. He just nodded at the chair across from him and said, "Let's see it." She appreciated that about him. He never wasted her time with the wrong kind of comfort. She opened her bag and set the printed documents on the table between them. He put on his reading glasses and went through them slowly, page by page. She watched his face while he read. It stayed very even, the same careful stillness he always brought to a problem. But she saw his jaw tighten once, when he got to the credit card statement with the furniture charges. "The vendor intake form," he said without looking up. "The residential address is right there in the original filing." "I know." He registered her apartment lease as a business vendor. "I know." He set the page down. "Danny, that's not sloppy. That's deliberate." She nodded. She had already thought that. She had thought about it for most of the drive over. A sloppy man makes mistakes. A deliberate man builds systems. Andre had built a system. For almost 2 years, maybe longer, and she had been the CFO who never looked. She let herself feel the weight of that for exactly 1 second. Then she set it aside. "I want to go further back," she said. "The 18 months don't feel right to me. The timing of when he brought her on. It's too clean, too convenient." Elijah looked at her over the top of his glasses. "What's your instinct?" "I don't know yet. That's what I need you to pull." He nodded and turned to his laptop. He had subpoena-adjacent access to card histories through her as an account co-holder, and together they began cross-referencing statements, hotel records, and travel receipts going back further than the marketing contract, further back than Simone's name had ever appeared in any company document. It took them just under 2 hours. The pattern emerged quietly, the way patterns always did, not all at once, but in pieces that slowly stopped looking like coincidence. A hotel in Raleigh, 34 months ago. A charge to a restaurant Danny didn't recognize, followed 2 days later by flowers billed to a card she had thought was for client dinners. A name on a reservation that wasn't Simone Carver. It was S. Cole. An alias close enough that only someone looking would catch it. Or someone who already knew what name to look for. "S. Cole," Elijah said quietly, and pushed the printed receipt across the table to her. 34 months ago. Danny sat very still. 34 months ago, she had been 7 months pregnant with Marcus. She had been swollen and exhausted and running the books from her home office because the commute had gotten too hard. She remembered that stretch of months clearly, the way Andre had been distracted and restless, the way she had told herself it was work stress, told herself he was nervous about the baby, told herself she needed to try harder to be present even when she was running on 4 hours of sleep. She had decided, back then, that the distance between them was her fault. She looked at the receipt in her hand, the hotel name, the date, S. Cole, a name just different enough to blur in a statement. He had been with Simone during her pregnancy, not 18 months ago, not when the retainer started, not when Simone got the firm credit card and the lease and the car. He had been with her before any of that, while Danny was carrying their son. She set the paper down on the table. 3 years, she said. Her voice came out flat and clean. She called Renee from the elevator. She didn't explain much over the phone. She just said, "I need to come over. I have something to show you." And Renee, who knew her sister's voice the way a person knows weather, simply said, "I'm here. Come." Renee's kitchen was small and warm and smelled like the lavender candle she always kept burning on the counter. She had already made tea by the time Danny got there. She took one look at Danny's face, not at the folder under her arm, just at Danny's face, and she pulled out a chair and sat down across from her without a word. Danny laid the papers on the table. She told Renee everything. She went in order, the way she'd lay out a balance sheet, what she found, what the numbers said, what the dates meant. She didn't cry. She kept her voice even and her hands flat on the table, and she watched her sister's expression shift from worried to stunned to something that didn't have a clean name for it. Renee picked up the receipt from the Raleigh hotel. She read the date. Her jaw went tight. "You were 7 months pregnant," she said. "Yes." Renee set the paper down. Hard. Not a slam, but close. And you spent that entire year thinking something was wrong with you? Danny didn't answer. She didn't have to. Danny, Renee's voice had dropped low. He let you believe that. He looked you in the face while you were carrying his child and let you sit there blaming yourself. She pushed back from the table slightly, like she needed a half an inch of space just to hold the anger in her body. You cannot protect him from this. Not even a little. Not for the kids, not for the business, not for anybody. I'm not protecting him. You're still talking like you're gathering evidence. Renee leaned forward. Stop gathering. Start building. There's a difference. One is waiting to see. The other is deciding you already know enough and you are going to end this on your terms. Danny looked at the papers spread across her sister's kitchen table. The dates, the signatures, the name that wasn't quite a name. 3 years of a life she'd been living inside a story someone else had written for her. She gathered the pages, straightened them, slid them back into the folder. When she looked up, something in her face had settled into a place it hadn't been before. Not harder, exactly. Clearer. Then that's what I'm doing, she said. The office was quiet on Tuesday morning. Andre had a site visit in Mooresville. Wallace wouldn't be in until noon. Danny had the whole floor to herself, and she used every minute of it. She pulled the falsified invoices up on her screen. The ones tied to the Shell consulting arrangement, the ones with Simone's signature on the line marked Vendor Representative. She had already gone through them twice, but this time she wasn't looking at Simone's name. She was looking at the approval line above it. Every invoice over $10,000 required a second signature inside Holt Development Group. That was a policy Danny herself had written into the firm's financial controls 4 years ago, after a vendor dispute that had cost them 6 weeks and a lawyer. It was supposed to be a safeguard, a check, a second set of eyes on anything large enough to matter. She had assumed, when she first found the invoices, that Andre had forged the second line himself, or left it blank and buried the documents deep enough that no one looked. She had been wrong. The signature on the approval line was neat, consistent, the same across all 11 invoices she pulled up, side by side on her screen. A practiced hand, unhurried. Someone who had signed his name 10,000 times and never thought twice about it. W. Pruitt. She sat back in her chair. Wallace, Andre's business partner for 11 years. The man who had given the toast at their wedding, who sent her kids' birthday cards every year without fail, always with a $20 bill folded inside. Who had sat at their dining room table more times than she could count and looked her in the eye and asked how she was doing. She thought about that for a moment. Not long, just long enough to register it. Then she opened a new folder on her private drive and started copying files. Wallace hadn't just looked the other way. He had signed his name. 11 times across 14 months he had reviewed those invoices. False vendor names, residential addresses listed as business locations, payment amounts that didn't align with any real marketing output, and he had approved them anyway. He had taken the pen and he had signed, and then he had gone back to whatever he was doing. That wasn't loyalty to a friend, that was fraud, and it had his name on it. She photographed each page and backed everything up in triplicate before she logged out and closed the screen. Sunday dinner at Patricia Holt's house had a rhythm to it that never changed. The good china came out. Someone brought wine. Patricia cooked something that required 2 days of preparation, and she acted as if she hadn't. The table was set before anyone arrived, flowers in the center, candles lit at both ends even when it was still light outside. Danny had always found it beautiful, in a formal kind of way. She sat across from Andre and kept her face pleasant and open, the way she had been doing for the past 2 weeks. She passed the bread basket when it came around and refilled Patricia's water glass and answered questions about the kids with the right amount of warmth. She was very good at this. She had been doing it, she now understood, for longer than she'd realized. Andre waited until Patricia brought out the dessert plates. He had chosen his moment carefully. Danny could see that. The candles were at their warmest. Patricia was in a good mood. The table felt easy. He reached over and covered Danny's hand with his. I have something I want to say. He looked at his mother first, then at Danny. His voice had that particular quality it got when he wanted to be believed. Warm and unhurried, like the words were coming from somewhere genuine. I know this last year has been a lot. Long hours, me traveling too much. He squeezed her hand. I want to make it right. I booked us a long weekend in Charleston, just the two of us. No phones, no office. Next month. Patricia pressed a hand to her chest. Andre, that's lovely. He was still looking at Danny, watching her face the way a man watches a door he isn't sure is locked. Danny looked back at him. She let a small smile come to her face, not too wide, nothing that would read as performance. Just enough. That sounds wonderful, she said. His shoulders dropped a fraction, relief dressed up as confidence. Patricia reached across the table and patted Danny's arm. You two needed this. I've been saying it. Danny nodded and kept the smile in place, and thought about the 11 signatures in the folder on her private drive. She was in Elijah's office by 8 the next morning. He had the documents already printed and laid out across the conference table in 2 neat rows. He didn't comment on Sunday. She hadn't told him about it, but he knew her well enough to read the particular quiet she'd walked in with. The original partnership agreement, he said, setting a pen beside the first page. The equity clause you insisted on when you filed. 51% operational authority, Danny said. I remember. He signed it, 12 years ago. It's never been amended. She picked up the pen. She signed. The networking event was held at a rooftop bar downtown, the kind of place with exposed Edison bulbs and a view of the city that made everything look more important than it was. Danny wore black. Simple. She had her card holder in her jacket pocket and a glass of sparkling water she barely touched. She worked the room the way she always did at these things. A handshake here, a name remembered there, a question asked that made the other person feel interesting. She was good at it. She had always been good at it. Andre had just never thought to notice. He wasn't there. He had a dinner across town, something with a city council contact. He'd told her about it that morning over coffee, with the casual ease of a man who had no idea his wife had spent the last 3 weeks studying him like a document. She was near the east railing, half listening to a conversation between 2 contractors, when she heard the name. Simone, you look incredible. Seriously. Danny didn't move. She kept her eyes on the city skyline and her posture loose. Stop. Simone's laugh was light, practiced, the laugh of someone who had learned to perform modesty without meaning it. I'm just happy, I think. Things are really coming together. Is it true you're going independent? I heard you're leaving the consultancy. A pause, small, the kind that fills with calculation. I'm transitioning, Simone said. By summer, everything should be settled. It's all moving in the right direction. That's exciting. What does that look like? Another pause, shorter this time, a door opening just slightly. Let's just say I have a lot to look forward to. Her voice dropped, but not enough, not nearly enough. I'm pregnant, actually. Still early, but things are… yeah. They're going to look very different by summer. The other woman gasped softly, delighted. Congratulations were offered. Simone thanked her. Danny took a slow sip of her water. Everything settled by summer. She turned those 4 words over carefully. She looked at them from every angle the way she would look at a line item that didn't balance. And it didn't balance. It hadn't balanced for a while, actually. She just hadn't had all the numbers until now. Andre hadn't been trying to save his marriage. He hadn't been trying to balance 2 lives out of weakness or indecision. He had a timeline. A finish line he was steering toward, with the same deliberate patience he applied to every deal he wanted to close. And Danny wasn't supposed to see it coming until it was already done. She was home by 9:30. Kids were asleep. The house was still. She sat down at her desk and texted Elijah 2 words. Check filings. He called her back in 40 minutes. There are 3 amended documents, he said. His voice was measured, but she knew him well enough to hear the edge underneath it. filed quietly in the last 6 weeks through a separate registered agent. 2 of them relate to the operating agreement. They're structured to trigger an automatic equity adjustment in Holt Development Group. The third is a valuation addendum that would shift operational control to a new managing entity. When would they take effect? After April 15th. Tax season. She felt the breath move through her, slow and even. He had planned to wait until every return was filed under the current structure, until the books reflected a version of the company that still had her name carrying the weight. Then, once that was finished, once the numbers were settled and the paperwork was clean, he would pull the thread. He would have restructured her out of the company she built. He would have had Simone and a new baby and a new arrangement, and Danny would have been left holding whatever fraction of the business he'd decided to leave her with. He had counted on her being too tired to look, too busy, too far inside the role of wife and mother to think of herself as founder. She had spent 12 years earning the right to be underestimated like this. "Elijah," she said. "Yeah?" "Set a meeting. Tomorrow morning." They met at 8. Elijah had the conference table cleared, except for 3 distinct stacks of documents, organized, she noticed, without her asking. He walked her through each one. The first, emergency legal filings to freeze the business accounts and formally establish her majority operational authority under the original partnership agreement. Divorce papers, prepared and ready. The second, a full financial recovery strategy, her half-ownership of all joint assets, the fraudulent invoice trail tied to Simone and Wallace, a formal audit referral to the firm's outside accountant. The third, a list of names. Patricia, Renee, Wallace's wife, people who deserved to be in the room when the truth was finally said out loud. "One day," Danny said, looking at the 3 stacks. "One day," Elijah confirmed, "if that's what you want." She thought about the petals on that hotel bed. She thought about the signature she'd signed in that same chair 6 days ago. She thought about Simone's voice on that rooftop. Everything settled by summer. Danny looked at the 3 stacks of documents and felt something quiet and certain settle in her chest. "That's what I want," she said. The courthouse opened at 8:30. They were waiting outside at 8:15. Elijah carried a leather portfolio thick with tabbed documents. Danny carried nothing but her bag and the kind of stillness that only comes from having already made every decision that needed to be made. The morning air was cold and sharp. Her breath showed in small clouds. She hadn't slept much, but she felt clear. Inside, the clerk's office smelled like old paper and burnt coffee. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Elijah handled the filings with the quiet efficiency of a man who had done this 100 times. He spoke in a low, even voice to the clerk, slid documents across the counter in sequence, and checked each one off a handwritten list in his portfolio. Danny stood beside him and signed where her name was required. Emergency business account freeze. Formal notice of majority operational authority under the original Holt Development Group partnership agreement. Divorce petition. Filed, stamped, recorded. The whole thing took 40 minutes. Outside on the courthouse steps, Elijah handed her a folder with the stamped copies. "It's done," he said. Danny looked down at the papers. Her name was printed at the top of each one. Clean, unambiguous, exactly as she had written it 12 years ago on the original agreement. Danielle Reeves Holt, co-founder. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me yet." But he said it warmly. She almost smiled. Tonight, he agreed. Andre had made the reservation himself. That was the detail that stuck with her each time she thought about it. He had called the restaurant, chosen the menu, arranged the flowers, all of it designed to look like a man fighting for his marriage, a performance staged for one audience. He didn't know she'd changed the guest list. The restaurant was the kind of place with white tablecloths and low light, soft, intimate, the kind of setting that was supposed to make disagreement feel impolite. Danny arrived early and spoke to the host, who confirmed the table had been expanded per her request that morning, 6 chairs instead of 2. She sat down and ordered still water. Patricia arrived next, elegant as always in a dark blazer, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She looked at the expanded table and then at Danny with an expression that asked a question she didn't voice yet. "Thank you for coming, Patricia." "You were specific," the older woman said, settling into her seat. "You said it was important." "It is." Renee came in right after, in scrubs she'd changed out of, but still had the tired, alert look of someone pulling a double shift on willpower. She squeezed Danny's hand without saying anything. Wallace's wife, Carol, arrived last, slightly breathless, clearly uncertain why she'd been invited at all. She was a soft-spoken woman who ran a small floral business and had always been politely kind to Danny at company events. She didn't know yet what her husband had done. Danny had invited her because she deserved to. Andre walked in 4 minutes later. He stopped when he saw the table, just for a second, a half-beat of surprise that crossed his face before his training kicked in and the smile returned. He kissed Patricia on the cheek, nodded at Renee, gave Carol a pleasant, practiced hello, and sat down across from Danny. "What a group," he said, with a small laugh that was meant to sound charmed. "I didn't know we were doing a whole dinner." "I expanded it," Danny said simply. "I hope you don't mind." "Of course not." He picked up the menu. "The more the merrier." She let him have that. She let him settle. Let him take a sip of water and exchange small talk with Patricia about the renovation project uptown. Let him feel like the room was still running on his terms. Then she reached into her bag. She set 3 folders on the table, placed them quietly, the way you'd place a folder on a desk for a meeting that had already started. "I want to talk about the company," she said. Andre looked at the folders. His smile stayed in place, but something behind his eyes shifted. "Danny, I'll be quick." She opened the first folder and slid a printed spreadsheet toward the center of the table. "This is 18 months of shell payments routed through a fabricated marketing contract. $340,000. Apartment lease, car payments, a private credit card." She paused. "All connected to Simone Carver." The table went very quiet. She opened the second folder. "These are the approval signatures on the falsified invoices." She slid that page toward Carol, who looked down and then back up, her color draining slowly. Wallace signed off on all of them. Carol looked at the page for a long moment. She didn't speak. Danny opened the third folder. "And these are the amended ownership documents filed 6 weeks ago through a separate registered agent, structured to dilute my equity and transfer operational control after tax season." She folded her hands on the table. "After everything was filed in my name." Andre set his menu down. "This is..." He laughed, short and sharp. "You're taking documents out of context. You know how this stuff looks from the outside. There are reasons for every one of those line items, and I can walk you through them if you just..." "The invoices have Simone's signature." Danny's voice was level. "They describe services that were never performed. I have the original contract templates they were built from." "Simone is a contractor. She bills the company. That's not unusual." "For an apartment?" The word landed and stayed. Patricia had not touched her fork. She was looking at the spreadsheet, then at her son, then back at the spreadsheet. "Andre." Her voice was quiet, precise, the tone of a woman who had spent decades learning when to speak and choosing each instance carefully. "Is any of what she is showing us true?" The table waited. Andre opened his mouth. Nothing came. The soft music played on somewhere overhead. A waiter approached and then, reading the table, turned quietly away. The candles between them burned low and steady, throwing light that caught the edges of the documents and the line of Patricia's jaw and the stillness of Danny's hands, which did not shake at all. Patricia called at 7:43 the next morning. Danny was at the kitchen table with her coffee, watching her daughter drag a stuffed rabbit across the tile floor. The house was quiet. Andre hadn't come home the night before. She picked up on the second ring. "Danielle?" Patricia's voice was steady, no preamble. "I want you to know where I stand." Danny set down her mug. "I'm listening." "The trust Andre draws from, the quarterly distributions. I spoke with my attorney this morning. I'm suspending them." A brief pause. "Indefinitely. He will not be receiving anything further from me while this is unresolved. And I mean the business and the marriage both." Danny didn't say anything right away. Outside, a bird landed on the back fence and then left again. "I also want you to know," Patricia continued, "that I am not doing this to punish him. I'm doing it because what I saw on that table last night was a theft. From you. From a business that carries my family's name." Her voice tightened just slightly. "I did not raise him to steal from his wife." "Patricia, I know I haven't always been easy on you." The older woman said it plainly, without decoration. "I want to correct that. Whatever you need from me going forward, you have it." Danny pressed her fingers against the edge of the table. The wood was cool and solid under her hand. "Thank you," she said. "That means something." "Good," Patricia said. "Then let's not waste it." Wallace Pruitt was removed from the Holt Development Group partnership on a Wednesday. The paperwork had been prepared by Elijah 4 days earlier, waiting only for the morning after the dinner to become relevant. Now it was very relevant. Elijah delivered the formal notice to Wallace's attorney at 9 a.m., citing the falsified invoice approvals and the material breach of his fiduciary duties as co-partner. By noon, the firm's outside auditor had received a complete referral package. Every shell payment, every forged approval, every fabricated line item Wallace had signed his name to in order to keep his friend's secret. Elijah had organized the documents with the kind of care that left no room for interpretation. Danny was told later that Wallace's attorney called back within the hour. She didn't take that call. There was nothing to discuss. She requested the meeting with Simone through a single text. No company email, no assistant. Her own phone, her own words. "I'd like to meet with you privately, once. I won't ask twice." Simone replied within the hour. They met at a coffee shop 3 miles from the office. Neutral ground, plain tables, nothing memorable about the space at all. Danny arrived first and chose a corner seat facing the door. Simone walked in looking composed. Her hair was neat, her coat was pressed, but her jaw was tight, and she held her bag strap with both hands, the way a person holds something when they need to feel steady. She sat down. "I know why I'm here," she said. "Good." Danny didn't reach for her coffee. "Then I'll keep this short." She placed a single sheet of paper on the table between them. It was a summary, clean, 1 page, of every payment tied to Simone's signature. The apartment, the car, the fabricated invoices that bore her name and described services that had never been performed. Simone looked at it. She didn't pick it up. "You signed those invoices," Danny said. "That makes them your problem, not just his. The outside auditor has the full package. Right now, the referral names Wallace." She paused. "It doesn't have to name you, but that is a choice you have to make today." Simone's eyes moved from the page to Danny's face. She was searching for something. Heat, satisfaction, cruelty. She didn't find any of it. "What do you want?" Simone asked. "Full cooperation with the audit. A complete account of every payment you received and how it was structured, and a repayment arrangement for the funds tied to your name." Danny's voice didn't waver. "That's all." "And if I don't?" "Then the referral gets updated before the week is out." Simone sat back slowly. The composure she'd walked in with was still there, but it had thinned. Underneath it was something that looked a lot like a woman realizing exactly how far out on a limb she had climbed, and how little of it was still attached to the tree. "He told me it was all legitimate," she said quietly. Danny looked at her. "You signed your name to it." Simone didn't answer that. "I need an answer," Danny said. A long moment passed. A coffee machine hissed somewhere behind the counter. 2 people at the next table laughed at something on a phone. "I'll cooperate," Simone said. Danny picked up the sheet, folded it once, and placed it back in her bag. I'll have Elijah send you the contact information for the auditor. You'll hear from him today. She stood, pulled on her coat, and left Simone sitting at the table. Within days, word moved through the industry the way it always does, not loudly, but completely. A contract here, quietly not renewed. A referral there that didn't come. Her consulting firm stopped returning her calls. Andre, stripped of the business and his mother's money, had nothing left to offer. Simone was left to face what remained entirely alone. The quarterly report was 43 pages long. Danny had read every one of them. She sat at her desk on a Wednesday morning in February, 1 year and 4 days after she had driven 3 hours through the dark to a hotel in Asheville. The office had been repainted since then. The logo on the wall behind the reception desk said Reeves Development Group in clean, brushed steel letters. Her name. Just hers. The numbers on the report were good. Better than good. The Callaway project had closed ahead of schedule. The Meridian contract, the one she'd quietly restructured when she took sole operational control, had come in 11% under budget. Their lending relationship was stronger now than it had been in 3 years. Danny had rebuilt it the same way she'd rebuilt everything else, slowly, carefully, without making any promises she couldn't keep. She circled a line item with a pen, made a note in the margin, and set the report down. The office was quiet. Through the glass wall, she could see her assistant at the front desk, answering a call. A junior analyst walked past with a stack of folders, gave Danny a quick nod through the glass. She nodded back. It was a normal morning. That was the thing she noticed most, how ordinary it had become to sit in this chair and feel like she belonged there. Elijah arrived at 10:15 with 2 coffees. He didn't knock. He'd stopped knocking about 6 months ago, which Danny had noticed and hadn't said anything about, which was its own kind of answer. "You've already read it," he said, glancing at the report on her desk as he set her cup down. "Twice. And?" "Callaway closed clean. Meridian came in under." She picked up the coffee. "We're having a good quarter, Elijah." He sat in the chair across from her, not the formal visitor's chair near the door, but the closer one. The one pulled up slightly to the side of the desk. It had been repositioned weeks ago, and neither of them had moved it back. "Good quarter," he smiled. "You spent 3 months renegotiating those terms from scratch." "Somebody had to." He looked at her the way he sometimes did, straight on, unhurried, like he had nowhere else to be and no interest in pretending otherwise. Danny had stopped finding it uncomfortable. She had started, somewhere in the past several months, finding it the opposite of that. "You look different," he said. "Good different, I hope." "Yeah," he said simply. "Good different." She held his gaze for a moment longer than she needed to. Then she looked down at her report and made another note in the margin, and he opened the folder he'd brought without saying anything else. They worked through the morning that way. His chair pulled close to the side of her desk, the city outside the window bright and cold and ordinary. Nothing dramatic, just 2 people, in a room, who trusted each other. Her daughter was 6 now. She met Danny at the door that evening the way she always did, running full speed down the hallway in socked feet, sliding the last 2 feet across the hardwood like it was a game she had invented and perfected. "Mama!" She held out a small bunch of flowers, the kind sold at the grocery store checkout, wrapped in plain plastic, 3 yellow daisies and some green filler that Danny didn't know the name of. One stem was bent near the bottom. "These are for you," her daughter said, "because I picked them." "You picked them from the checkout line?" "I picked which ones." The girl looked completely certain this was the same thing. Danny crouched down and took the flowers. They were small and slightly wilted, the petals a little uneven. Nothing had been arranged. Nothing had been planned. There was no performance in it at all. Only a 6-year-old who had seen something bright and thought of her mother. She pressed her face briefly into the top of her daughter's head. "They're perfect," Danny said. "Go wash your hands for dinner." She put the flowers and a glass of water on the kitchen counter and stood there for a moment, looking at them. Andre saw the sign on a Thursday. He had come to collect some documents from the building's administrative office, a minor errand, the kind that came with being a minority stakeholder in a company where he held no operational role and made no decisions. He parked in the same lot he had parked in for 9 years. He walked toward the entrance the same way he always had. He looked up. Reeves Development Group. Her name. Brushed steel, clean lines, mounted exactly where the old sign had been. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment. A woman pushed past him with a stroller. A delivery driver pulled in beside him. The city went on exactly as it always did. He went inside. In another city, 300 miles away, Simone Carver was at her desk by 7:30 every morning. She had one client now, small and unglamorous. She was building slowly. She was paying back what she owed every month, on a schedule Elijah had drawn up and the auditor had signed off on. It was going to take a long time. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories